Hi everyone, and welcome to the second day of the conference Frontiers in Foundations of Physics, the Philosophical Inquiry. It's my pleasure to welcome our first speaker today, Professor Mehdi Golshani. Professor Golshani is a prominent Iranian theoretical physicist and philosopher. Professor Golshani is the founder of the Department of Philosophy of Science at Sharif University of Technology. He was also director of the Institute for Humanities and Cultural Studies in Tehran and a distinguished professor at Physics Department of the Sharif University of Technology, as well as a senior fellow of the School of Physics at the Institute for Studies in Theoretical Physics and Mathematics. His research interests are foundational physics and philosophical aspects of physics. Professor Golshani has published several books, such as Probe into the Philosophical Viewpoints of Contemporary Physicists, Secular and Religious Science, and Can Science Dispense with Religion? Now, I would like to invite Professor Golshani to express his views on. He will tell us about the revival of philosophy and physics in recent decades. Professor Golshani, please.
In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, welcome to my dear listeners.
Professor Golshani.
Unfortunately, it doesn't go.
Click on the three dots icon and take control of your slideshow.
Pardon me?
Click on the three dots icon on top of the slides.
Well, there is not the 3 points. It has gone out of it.
Okay, let me open it again. Close and open it.
I am clicking on the 3 points.
Okay. Do you see your slides?
I see my slide.
Okay. On top of it, there is a three dot icon.
Yes.
Okay, click on that and.
Yes. Okay. But it doesn't.
Okay, if you drag your mouse on your slides, you can see the arrows.
I don't see the arrows.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. The arrows go the wrong way, unfortunately. There is no arrow to the left. I don't know why. There is no arrow to the left. It was always there.
Okay, drag your mouse out of the slides and bring back. It may be reappear.
Should I get out of this? It's very unfortunate. It goes one way, but not the other way.
You can use your keyboard, I think, on the left arrow on your keyboard.
What?
You can press the left arrow on your keyboard. Please try that.
The left arrow in the keyboard. No, it says leave.
Okay, let me try again. I close this and open you do the same.
Okay. It's very unfortunate. Very unfortunate.
Okay. You click on the three dot icon again and take control, please. Professor Golshani.
I did with the 3 points, but it doesn't come to the right or left.
Okay, click on taking control and three dots. You didn't click on that. Click on the three dots icon.
That
Okay.
I did. It's
Okay.
yes, I did.
And take
But
control now.
with control the on the keyboard?
No, no,
No,
no. Click on the three dots icon.
I did.
Okay.
But it says closing only.
Okay. Let me try again. Please click on the three dots icon again.
Yes, it says only Bastan. It doesn't come
Okay.
to the right or left.
مدیریت اسلاید شو.
Yes, but doesn't come now this
Okay.
time. It came before, but now it doesn't come.
Okay. Are you okay? We changed the slides on your orders.
No, no.
Okay. Let me
It's
try.
very unfortunate. Why it doesn't go on to order? It just comes only on closing. Come, bring again the slide.
Okay, okay. Okay. Try again, please.
It doesn't come. The other one doesn't come. Only it says closing.
Closing. Okay. Let me change you again. Um, Professor Golshani, can you open your mic again and try again, please?
I don't know why this happened.
You can
okay.
see.
Now to the right it goes. Okay.
Okay, okay.
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 Sorry for keeping you waiting. Okay, I want to explain what happened that philosophy returned to eminent physicists of our time in the last 3 decades. Science, in its modern sense, did not exist as a separate discipline at the Greek time, nor in the Islamic civilization era, nor in the Middle Ages. After the development of science and manifestation of its success in explaining many phenomena and improving practical aspects of life, science abandoned philosophy and went its own way. Furthermore, since the beginning of 19th century, science became supreme authority and philosophy lost its prestige in the eye of scientists. The growth of some anti-metaphysical philosophies, like positivism, fortified this attitude. Thus, the refutation of metaphysics became a fashion among scientists, physicists, and other scientists. The empiricist philosophy, which became prevalent, especially among British philosophers of the 17th and 18th century, became dominant in the 19th and the first half of the 20th century. The schools of positivism, operationalism, pragmatism, and similar schools appeared. The common feature of all these empiricistic schools was that they gave primacy to sense experience and rejected both religion and metaphysics. Thus, physical concept became removed from physical theories. The second, as می شود, the school of positivism affected physicists tremendously, and in spite of the decline of positivism in the last several decades, the positivistic spirit is still dominant in most physical departments. The empiricist philosophy, which had started with some celebrated British philosophers of the 17th and 18th century, became dominant with the appearance of Auguste Comte and his positivism. As I said, the common feature of all of these was that they gave primacy to sense perception. Uh, it doesn't remove. Yes. The most important claims of the contemporary empiricists are the following. All knowledge about the physical world comes from sense perception, and all statements about the world are statements about such experiences. The aim of theorizing is to give an order to human experience and to predict new experiences. The task of physics is not to describe any reality behind sense perception, only to explain phenomena. The value of scientific theories is their usefulness as tools for predicting phenomena and not for their truthfulness. In fact, theories are merely tools for predicting phenomena and not referring to a reality behind phenomena. Metaphysical assertions are neither scientific nor philosophical. The sole task of philosophy is to analyze the language of science. This was the claim of empiricists. But many challenges came about these claims. First, they said, we never encounter nature with empty minds. Our interpretation of empirical data depends on, to some extent, among our presuppositions. Many concepts are not derivable from sense experience. For example, the concept of causality is not derived from sensory impressions. All we receive through our senses uh, uh, is all we receive is through our senses. For example, we see about causality. We see B comes after A regularly. This, this is a causal relation, but this is the judgment of our intellect. We do not, on the basis of mere one going after another, we can talk about causality. We often use concepts that do not seem to be directly observable. For example, quarks in particle physics. A strict empiricism forbids such concepts. In the history of physics, there are many causes in which an abstract mathematical concept was introduced when there was no physical ground for it, but subsequently turned out to be essential for the development of physical theory. Many examples, for example, like matrices. The number of experiments that verify a universal law of nature are always limited. Thus, in accepting a proposition as a general law, one is exceeding experience. A scientist's work is always based consciously or unconsciously on some general principles. These so-called guiding or regulative principles are not deducible from experiments. Rather, they are metaphysical assumptions which provide a framework for scientists' line of research. Finally, the metaphysical assumptions used by scientists in their theory making are not deducible from science itself. Rather, they are taken from some schools of philosophy or from some religion. For example, Einstein considered the idea of comprehensibility of nature to have been taken from the sphere of religion. Andre Linde, the famous Russian cosmologist, believed that the prevalent idea of searching for a theory of everything in the unifying forces is rooted in monotheistic religions. Physicists' arguments about some metaphysical principles were philosophical rather than scientific. For example, Max Born admitted in 1926 that his renunciation of causality in the atomic domain had been a philosophical decision. He said it explicitly, it was a philosophical decision. Physics raises questions for which answers are beyond its domain. For example, where do the laws of physics come from? Or where are they, why are they comprehensive to us? Physics cannot answer it by itself. In fact, the work of every scientist involves some philosophical presuppositions, even though he might not be aware of this fact. The rejection of metaphysics does not solve any problem. Rather, it replaces an explicit philosophy with an uncontrolled philosophy, in the words of Hermann Weyl, one of the most important mathematicians of the 19th century. He said, and the early 20th century. He said, in spite of the fact that the laws of the views of philosophy may sway from one system to another, we cannot discern with it unless we are to convert knowledge into a meaningless chaos. Nicholas Maxwell, a contemporary British philosopher of science, believes that there is a need for a revolution in the philosophy of science and a return to natural philosophy, not analytic philosophy, not to continental philosophy, to analytic philosophy, to natural philosophy, a return to natural philosophy. According to Maxwell, in the beginning of new science, science and philosophy were together under the banner of natural philosophy, both in the Greek time, in the Islamic civilization era, etc. But with the decline of natural philosophy, they became separated. But reason and rationality required that again they join together. Maxwell mentions two reasons for the decline of natural philosophy: the prevalence of empiricism. The second reason, the inability of philosophers to handle philosophical problems of science. But there was a revival for philosophy in the recent decades. I want to explain why. As we mentioned, physicists neglected philosophical concern for more than a century. And this trend is still continuing in many scientific circles. But in the last several decades, there has been a movement in the direction of the revival of philosophical concerns among eminent physicists. Here I mentioned several evidences. First, some eminent contemporary scientists have mentioned that important have mentioned the important role of philosophical assumptions in science. Paul Davies says it very clearly. He says, however successful our scientific explanations may be, they'll always have uh, certain starting assumptions built in. For example, in the explanation of some phenomena in terms of physics, presupposition, physics presupposes the validity of the laws of physics, which are taken as given. But one can ask where these laws of physics come from, where these laws come from in the first place. One could even question the origin of logic. Logic logic as می شود upon which the whole thing is the whole science is built. Something has to be taken as given, whether it is God, logic, or set of laws, or some other foundation of science. This has to be taken for granted. That's all ultimate questions will always remain. I believe that certain developments in are caused by a misconception by some physicists avoid with poor they pose only a slight exaggeration to say that whose good one of the important cosmologies of physics needs philosophy
Sorry, Professor Golshani, I think your internet is weak. If you close your video, we can have your sound better.
the world of the present time is
Sorry, Professor Golshani, your internet is weak. We cannot hear you. If you close your camera, we can hear your voice better. Professor Golshani, please turn on your mic.
well I read it from the print. Okay, I am reading the Heisenberg sentence. I believe that certain erroneous developments in particle theory, and I am afraid that such developments do exist, are caused by a misconception by some physicists that it is possible to avoid philosophical arguments altogether, starting with poor philosophy. They pose the wrong questions, and it is only a slight exaggeration to say that good physics has at times been spoiled by poor philosophy. Carlo Rovelli says the fundamental scientific view of the world at the present time is characterized by an astonishing amount of perplexity and disagreement about what time, space, matter, and causality are. But if a new synthesis is to be reached, I believe that philosophical thinking will be once more one of the ingredients. Due to the conceptual vastness of problematics involved, the generality and accuracy of philosophical thinking, and its capacity to clarify conceptual premises are probably necessary to help physics out of a situation in which we have learned so much about the world. But no longer now we matter, no longer know what matter, time, space, and causality are. Some physicists claim that physics will finally answer all questions raised in science and ultimate questions of humanity. But many eminent physicists have rejected this claim. In the words of Roger Penrose, the distinguished physicist philosopher, there is there is a certain physicist arrogance about it that suggests that knowing all the physical laws would tell us everything about the world, at least in principle. Does a physical theory of everything include a human, include a theory of consciousness? Does it include a theory of morality or human behavior or aesthetics? Even if our idea of science could be expanded to incorporate these things, would we still think of it as physics, or would it be reducible to physics? And George Ellis says we use both broad criteria that take into account the whole range of human experience and not just part just part which can be scientifically described. Essentially, the investigation of foundation science are beyond the scope of science. This point of George Ellis is very important, that they have to realize that science cannot answer all questions. Now I want to talk about the evidences for the revival. In recent decades, several journals are publishing articles dealing with philosophical aspects of physics. Secondly, many conferences have been performed about the philosophical aspects of some important problems in physics and cosmology. Problems like the arrow of time, Oxford in 2012, Oxford University in 2012. Is God explainable, Oxford in January 2014. Cosmology and Foundations of Quantum Theory, Oxford University, June 2013. A Structure in Physics, University of Rutgers in US, April 2013. Relativity Meets Quantum Theory, London School of Economics, November 2013. Some selection effects and fine tuning in cosmology, again in Oxford. Some universities, third point is that some universities in UK, Canada, and USA are offering joint degrees in physics and philosophy. For example, London University offers a BSc degree in physics and philosophy. Oxford University offers a 4 year program in physics and philosophy. York University in Canada offers a BSc degree in physics and philosophy. Nottingham University in UK offers a BSc degree in physics and philosophy. London University in UK offers a BSc degree in physics and philosophy. Manchester University offers an AMA program in physics and philosophy. And in recent years, some universities are offering a degree in the philosophy of physics. London School of Economics has established a philosophy of physics program. Oxford University has a philosophy of physics group. University of Pittsburgh in USA is offering a philosophy of has a philosophy of physics group. University of California at San Diego has a philosophy of physics group. New York University has a philosophy of physics group. Columbia University in USA offers an MA degree on the philosophical foundations of physics. Finally, in the last decade, some coalitions were performed between physicists and philosophers in some of the universities of UK and USA to work on philosophical aspects of some major problems in physics and cosmology. This happened both in USA and in the UK. In USA, five universities, University of Columbia, New York, Rutgers, and عرض می شود که ییل and the University of California in the west of America at Santa Cruz اینها defined a program that entitled The Investigation in the Philosophy of Cosmology to work on the following problems: establishing a new field called Philosophy of Cosmology, a field between physics and philosophy; forming a coalition between investigations in philosophy, physics, astronomy, and theology; working on some fundamental problems and theories in the philosophy of cosmology; having conferences, workshops, and summer schools on the philosophy of cosmology. This project is centered at the philosophy department of Rutgers University, and they have عرض می شود که they have had many workshops, many conferences, etc. In 1212, 2 years after these five universities in USA, two universities in UK, Oxford and Cambridge, also formed a group of eminent scholars from the Department of Philosophy, Physics, Mathematics, Computer, and Philosophy to work on the following problems. What is the meaning of probability in fundamental physics and cosmology? Is there only one universe or there are many universes? What is the geometry of the whole universe? What is the meaning of fundamental laws and fundamental constants of nature? This group in the Oxford, Cambridge have defined a joint project with the five universities in the US to work on philosophical problems of cosmology and quantum theory. This is really has been very, very crucial. It didn't exist before. When I was in USA 50 years ago, there was none of these things happening. Now philosophy has written among very brilliant cosmologists, physicists, etc. And some philosophers have learned physics, have got degrees in physics, etc. So I think this is a very new blessing for enriching physics. But a lot of departments in all of these countries are still all believing in positivism. And I think this keeps science very much behind. Don't forget that Weinberg himself, who was a positivist, wrote a couple of years ago, wrote an article against positivism and said positivism causes the lagging of science behind. So he recommended to go beyond positivism. Now, what I want to conclude is that in the last recent decades, many physicists have started to pay attention to the philosophical dimensions of their investigation in physics or cosmology, and or even with biologists. And some coalitions have been formed between physicists and philosophers of some important Western universities. And it has become clear that separation of physics from philosophy or biology from philosophy degrades all of them. So my recommendation is that it is necessary for physicists to pay attention to the philosophical dimensions of their science. Thank you very much for your help, patience.
Thank you, Professor Golshani. It's time for questions. If there are questions, please raise your hand and your microphone will be turned on. Yes, Mr. Danish. Yes, please.
Thank you, dear professor. Uh, I believe uh, joining philosophy and physics not only improve and promote our science in the future, but also uh, teachers should understand that they do not affect on students' concept. I mean that teachers should let the students to work and individual thinking. But you see, in most of the university, teachers do not allow to think individually on their works. I want to know what's your idea about this. Thank you.
You see, students, if students learn, do you hear my voice?
Yes.
Yeah. If students learn some philosophy in the earlier years, their thinking become wider. They think more widely. You see, the point is that Heisenberg said, do not see the whole world with a glass of your specialty. The world is larger than your specialty, physics, etc. I think teaching humanities and especially philosophy and philosophy of science in the earlier years of the university and to a certain extent the simpler parts of them at the high school help to prepare students for this kind of thing. And when teachers see that the students are insisting on and are really willing to understand these questions, they have to learn to answer them. You see, in one of the universities in USA, students, a professor of physics, what is your idea about Bohr's quantum theory? He said, I don't know, but he went and learned it, and next time he came and gave a lecture about it. So I think if the students have a wider background, which has happened in some of the US universities, students have to take some humanities. If they have a wider background, then they become ready. And the teachers also learn to have to be patient. And they themselves go and learn some of the things.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for your attention, Doctor.
Dr. Tarabi, please.
Salamun alaikum.
Salaam alaikum.
Professor Golshani, thank you for your presentation. I have a question. How do you see the future philosophy of science and philosophy of physics in Iran? How do you see the future?
You see, since Iran has been always looking toward the West, if it is presented in Iran, the things that have happened in the USA. For example, many universities, important universities, first-rate universities, have established department of philosophy or philosophy of physics in the last 3 or 4 years. If they notice that they have to do it, because we always look after them. And if they see that these kind of developments have happened in the West, they have to bring it in. I think you have to advertise, to write articles on the things which has happened in the West, and to present the ideas of important physicists, philosophers, etc. And see that one of the most important physicists of our time says physics needs philosophy, philosophy needs physics. Then, because of the importance they give to physics, they go and learn also philosophy. There has to be a good advertisement for what has happened in the West. In this area, there has not been much done, unfortunately. That kind of wind that has started in the West has not reached our environment yet to the enough level, Some are of genius students, I have noticed they have gone and learned this kind of things, but generally our departments of physics, etc., are ignorant about these developments in the West, in all of the theories, in quantum theory, in cosmology, in all of these things has happened. If they learn that Feynman, one of the most important physicists of our time, says that the certainty of now is not going to be the certainty of the 100 years from now, then they see that the science is developing, and they are not saying the final word, so they have to work more and more.
Thanks for your reply, Professor.
Professor Golshani, there is a question in the chat. They have asked, what is the reason of the revival of philosophy in physics, I guess?
You see, the reason I have, of course, explained this in my books, but you see, what happened was that the philosophy of science, and a branch of science, philosophy of science, started in the West. Some philosophers of science appeared, like Popper, like Kuhn, etc. These schools of philosophy had different ideas, different presuppositions, but they shared in one thing. They were sharing one thing, that we do not look at nature with empty minds. We always bring in our presuppositions, which we have taken from our religion, from this philosophy, from that philosophy, etc. They notice that they cannot explain ethical values on the basis of science, empirical science. There are some important questions that Popper calls them uh, fundamental questions of humanity. These kind of questions they cannot answer by science itself. Where am I coming from? Where do I go to? Etc. These questions also we cannot answer. Peter Medawar, Nobel Prize winner in medicine, says the same thing. We cannot say where do we come from or where are we going to. So this kind of things science cannot answer. Then they notice that in every physical theory there are some general assumptions which are not taken from the science itself. They are taken from somewhere else, from this philosophy, from that philosophy, from the religion, etc. As I said, for example, Linde says the thing that physicists are looking for to unify the four fundamental forces of nature, this is taken from monotheistic religion. So they notice that all of the theories have some very general conceptions that are not taken from science itself. Why do we understand nature? Science cannot say why do we understand nature. Why we can explain nature by mathematical formulas, etc. Science cannot. So they notice that there are this kind of questions. And that in every field of science there are some fundamental beyond science assumptions. This provided a ground for returning to philosophy. These 4 points that they cannot, a couple of points, they cannot answer the ethical values. They cannot, where do they come from? They cannot answer ultimate questions of humanity. They cannot say where do these principles that we assume in nature come from. We assume that, for example, in cosmology, we assume that the thing that we see on the ground is also true in Venus also, etc. The same sodium that exists here, we are assuming. We assume a lot of things for planets that we don't have access to. These things cause the return of philosophy. And so they said that there has to be an umbrella over science that can take care of all of these things. A worldview. That's what we call a worldview. A worldview is governing over science. For Aristotle, there was a worldview. For Muslim scientists, there was a worldview, some of which was taken from the philosophical problem, principles of religion. During the Middle Eastern centuries, also there was the same kind of thing. So they found that they cannot escape some general principles. For example, Newton said in his book, in his great book, as philosophical aspects of physics, which is mechanic books. In his mechanics book say, I make no assumption. In other words, all that I am saying is taken from nature, from phenomena, etc. But Max Moulin, one of the important philosophers of our time, wrote a book and showed that how many as general metaphysical principles Newton has used on his book on optics, etc. So we cannot escape philosophical assumption. This is they found out, and so philosophy was returned to physics. At the
Sorry,
eminent
sorry, Professor Golshani, for interrupting. There is a queue of questions.
Yes.
Professor Shafi, please.
آقای دکتر سلام.
سلام.
افشین شفیعی هستم. خسته نباشید چون اینجا دوستان به هر حال بیشتر ایرانی هستن. من سوالم رو به زبان فارسی از شما میپرسم. شما به یک سری نکات اشاره فرمودین، یک سری سوالات مهمی که حالا در طی سالهای اخیر در مجلات یا کنفرانس ها در حوزه فیزیک و فلسفه مطرح شده. خواستم از جناب عالی بپرسم که اگر چند سوال مهم رو شما خودتون بخواید ذکر بفرمایید، چه سوالهایی رو بیشتر اهمیت میدید در حوزه فیزیک فلسفه که هنوز پاسخ روشنی ندارن و شما توجه فیزیکدان ها، شاید شیمیدان ها، همچنین بیولوژیست ها و فیلسوف های علم و فیزیک رو در این موارد مهم میدونید؟ که چند مورد از این پرسش ها رو خوشحال میشم از زبان خودتون بشنوم. خیلی ممنونم.
ببینید، یه مرتبه فیزیکدونا اومدن سراغ وحدت بخشی نیروها. یه مرتبه اومدن سراغ وحدت بخشی نیروها، در صورت که قبلا بود. هم مکسول این کار کرده بود، هم نیوتن به یه نحوی کرده بود، ولی حالا یه مرتبه رسمی اومدن این 4 تا نیرویی که تو بشناسن. خوب تفحص کردن ببینن این اندیشه از کجا اومده. 3 نفر برنده شدن برای اینکه 2 تا این از این نیروها رو وحدت بخشیدن، گلاشو و واینبرگ و پروفسور عبدالسلام. دلایل اینا متفاوت بود. یکیشون برای سادگی کار، عرض میشه، و عبدالسلام برای اینکه ایده را از توحید گرفته بود. من پیشنهادم اینه که ببینن این تئوری های رایج واقعا چه بعد فلسفی پشتشه، رو اونا دقت بکنن. اون فرضیات از بین نرفته، مصادیقش از بین رفته. ببینید الان ما یه نظریه کوانتوم داریم، کوانتوم استاندارد، همه آزمایش های فعلی را توضیح میده. یه نظریه کوانتوم بهمی هم داریم، اونم همه آزمایش های فعلی را توضیح میده. فرق اینا چیه؟ فرق اینا در اصولیه که پذیرفتن. تو بعضی اصول مشترکن، ولی مثلا در اصل علیت این 2 تا تئوری فرق دارن. اینجا بیان نگاه کنن ببینن کدوم یکی از این 2 تا غنی تره. اون که بگون در حوزه اتمی علیتی تو کار نیست غنی تره، یا اون که میگه علیتی تو کار هست، عرض میشود که و به قول فیزیکدونای حالا علیتی تو کار هست ولی هنوز نشناختیم، باید بگردیم پیدا کنیم و غیره. کدوم یکی از اینا غنی تره؟ اون که میگه هنوز نشناختیم کاوش شما ادامه پیدا میکنه. اون که میگه که نه علیتی تو کار نیست در دکونه میبنده. بنابراین تو این فرضیاتی که یا نظریه هایی که میپذیرن ببینن چی پشت این نظریه ها و بعد ببینن کدوم غنی تره. ببینید واینبرگ گفت که من هرچی پیش میرم جهان را بی هدفتر مییابم. اومدن جوابش یه دی دادن نه، نیافتن دلیل بر نبودن نیست. کاری کردن که خودش مجبور شد بیاد بگه که نه، هرچی پیش میریم یافتن هدف جهان مشکل تره. حالا من حرفم اینه، دانشجو میخورد به این سوال که آیا جهان هدف داره یا نداره. کدوم یک از اینا تفحص و کاوش را بیشتر به دنبال داره؟ اون که هدف نداره یا اون که هدف داره ما نمیدونیم باید پیدا کنیم؟ معلومه این دومی. بنابراین این دانشجوها دقت کنن روی نظریه هایی که میپسندن. یک کاری عرض میشود که پنروز کرده خیلی زیبا تو همون کتابش، که اینشتین البته اینو گفته بود، اینقدر که نقش مد تو خانوم حاکمه، توی فیزیکدونا اینقدر که بین فیزیکدونا مد حاکمه، تو خانوما نیست. عرض میشود که تو فشن خانوما نیست. خب مسئله اینه که واقعا باید دقت کنن چرا این نظریه رو پذیرفتن. شما این کتاب خودتونم دیدین، کتاب کوشینگ در کوانتوم مکانیکس نگاه کنید، تمام کتاب استدلالش اینه که فیزیک دلیل این نبود که تئوری کوانتوم استاندارد رایج شد، دلایل دیگه پشت قضیه بود. اینه که به نظر من مهمترین سوال اینه که دقت کنن تو پذیرش نظریه ها، ببینن چه چیزی پشت اینا هست و کدوما غنی تره واقعا برای ادامه.
Please, the last question.
Dear Professor, I ask my question. I hope you will have time to answer. You often talk about the possibility of religious science. Do you know any examples of Islamic science in the contemporary history of science in Islamic countries?
Well, first of all, you see, it is very much a misconception about Islamic science, unfortunately, especially in our country. But for example, in Indonesia or Malaysia, there is no misconception. What I said about Islamic science in my original article, more than 100 articles has been written in Indonesia and have confirmed it. So let me say what I mean by Islamic science. I think we do not take science from the holy books, from the Torah or from the Quran. No. Quran has explicitly to go after experimentation and theoretical work. Explicitly Quran says that. It both recommends experimentation and theoretical work. So where does the role of religion come? When we do some experiments and we want to make a theory, then in accepting various theories, many metaphysical principles come in. Many metaphysical principles come in. Some of these are religious, like whether there is a purpose in the universe or not. Some of them are not, neutral. Now, it is here that religious science enters. And you see, there was a book written in US, The Myth of Religious Neutrality. افسانه از خنثی بودن نسبت به مذهب. He proves that in every field, psychology gives examples in psychology, sociology, in every field, at some points, an assumption comes which is either anti-religion or religious. And you see, there was a conference.
Professor Jan, sorry for interrupting. You have just 1 minute. Please wrap up.
Pardon me?
You have 1 minute time. Please wrap up. We have to move to our next talk.
Okay. There was a conference. I finish it now. There was a conference in Canada about the theistic science. This is really religious science. And 4 books published articles of that conference. In some of the Islamic countries has been defined in the way I accept. In some of the Western countries has been the same way. If you read the articles of Roger Trick, for example, the answers of Roger Trick, etc., in the book Can Science Dispense with Religion, you see that they have the same idea as I have. So there has to be a good precision in defining things. And there is a much misconception. If you say to define it, they cannot define it, or there are competitions. Somebody wants to have his own thing ahead, so it says a lot of things, etc.
Thank you, Professor Golshani. Thank you very much for the interesting talk. We have to move to our next talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And
Welcome.
goodbye to everybody.
Bye. Thank you.